I know I've been trying to make the content on this channel higher quality, but we're doing this again. So, I've been thinking a lot about books. That's kind of a rarity, because reading is kind of hard sometimes. Especially reading novels. Reading a novel is a monumentous task that only the most giga-brained of gamers can do. But as a gamer, I read multiple novels worth of text in pretty much every video game I play. But also, a lot of that is voice acted. Now, there's no voice acting in a novel, right? Wrong! Audiobooks, baby! Now, I've been a big fan of audiobooks for as long as I can remember. Growing up with a learning disability definitely makes it hard to sit down and read, you know. Hard to sit down and focus on anything that isn't actually super interesting to you. It's just the fact of the life, you know. So audiobooks. During school, we had to read tons of random novels, classics, and the most random garbage you've ever heard of in your life. Mostly related to what we were learning in class in history and such, and they were very hit or miss. There was a lot of novels that I read during my schooling days that I quite enjoyed, such as The Giver by whoever the fuck wrote The Giver. I quite liked the 2014 film adaptation of the book as well, even though the rest of the series never got adapted and basically has no notoriety throughout pretty much anyone I've talked to before. I was quite taken by the story, but other than that, there were rarely books that really piqued my interest. When I started really reading, it was all manga all the time. And I'm sure that's very relatable to a lot of people, especially in my generation. I first started with the Legend of Zelda manga, starting from Ocarina of Time, and reading every single release that was out at the time, which was pretty much everything excluding Twilight Princess, which didn't actually start publication until the release of Twilight Princess HD for the Nintendo Wii U. Since then, I got into a lot more Shonen Jump manga, reading stuff like One Piece, Bleach, Naruto, and whatever else was popular at the time. These days, I've read a lot of manga, but generally I haven't finished many series, even if they have already concluded. Something I would like to do more of, but hey, I am also very slow with reading manga. Right now, I'm technically reading Hunter x Hunter and Jujutsu Kaisen, but really I'm just reading Jujutsu Kaisen because the war arc, the forthcoming war arc in Hunter x Hunter is very, very scary to me. But I will read it. Mark my words, I will read it this year. I'm making a plan this year. It's gonna Succession War. That's the arc. I remember the name. I'm gonna read Succession War this year. No one can stop me. And obviously, Jujutsu Kaisen is big popular right now with the recent conclusion of the second season of the anime adaptation. And the manga just keeps getting better and better. Holy dog. The arc that follows the Shibuya incident arc that just concluded in the anime just keeps the momentum going. And there are so many sequences that are just the craziest shit I've ever seen. I think Gege is an absolute visionary mangaka, and he could truly go down as one of the greats in manga history. Now, the difference with manga is obviously it's a visual medium. It's honestly a lot more similar to cinema, or rather even more Western television shows because of the sheer length and runtime of these manga. It's a lot more similar to that than other books and even other graphic novels. Now, graphic novels have also been a big stumbling point in my reading history because I never really got into them. As a kid, you know, I wasn't super interested in superheroes. Obviously, there was a lot of cool stuff out there. You know, I've always liked, you know, Batman, Spider-Man, but you know, I wasn't a big Marvel or DC guy growing up. I just kind of liked what was out there, you know. Took what I could get. Now, I read Scott Pilgrim back in the day, but that's much more manga inspired. It is absolutely using the language of manga, even though it is a Western story. And so this is all going back to books. Books, I read books, and then I fall asleep. You know, I try to read books, I keep reading, I get a few pages in, I get a few chapters in. Sometimes they don't really grab me though, and when it doesn't grab me, paint a vivid picture in my mind that keeps me reading, page turning, honestly that's never really happened to me. I kind of read books out of necessity, like there's no other way to experience this story, so I must read it as simply words on page. But in many such cases, many very fortunate cases, we have audiobooks. Now, I first got into audiobooks when I was trying to read books for class and just simply did not have the patience to read them. So I can't say I have any particularly strong opinions on the audiobooks I listened to throughout my middle school and high school years. But as a late teen, I discovered something called Bake Monogatari. Or rather, Kizumonogatari, because that is the book in question, the specific volume that introduced me to the series. Now, of course, this series was mega popular throughout the 2010s, and especially in the early 2010s, so I had already seen the anime. But frankly, I don't consider that to be my introduction, because I just watched it because I heard about it. I was way too young for the series, and I really didn't get it at all. I didn't like it or appreciate it back then. And one day, I realized that the audiobook adaptation of the very first novel in the series was not a thing. But the audiobook adaptation, or rather version of one of the novels in the series, which is chronologically the first story in the main series, but not the first story in the overarching series, because there's stories that take place 1,000 years ago. Anyways, Kizumonogatari. Not exactly book 1, but the first book that was released in English. And it came out alongside an audiobook edition. So of course, I scooped up that audiobook and the story I was privy to, and it was certainly a story to remember. A colorful but small cast of weirdos, really interesting prose, and a story that I could definitely not see coming. All punctuated by brilliant performances by big-name voice actors that I've heard many times before in anime and video games. Now, this really helped this book shine. Along with some sound effects and even some music in there, it's extremely high quality. It feels like you're watching an anime just without the visuals, really painting a vivid picture in your mind, which is something I personally always had trouble with when trying to read on my own. Now, of course, an audiobook can be an ideal experience when experiencing a novel for the first time, but what if the novel you want to read doesn't exist in audio format? That happens quite a lot. See, as a teenager, I was very much into, or interested by, more accurately, light novels. Now, a lot of these novels I've fallen out of favor with, or they're just not actually that good. Although some of them are peak mid-fiction, we'll talk about that another time. But most of them do not have audio versions. So, I didn't read them. Even though I loved anime, like the Haruhi Suzumiya series, I never really got into the books because I simply didn't have an accessible enough way of reading them. Eventually, someone made an audiobook on YouTube, so I downloaded all of it because I knew that shit wouldn't last. And it didn't, because you cannot find that anymore. But hey, I have them. I got them. You can't have them though. But then of course, not every audiobook is built the same. Just because your original novel has fantastic prose and vivid imagery, enriching themes, doesn't mean the audio version is going to properly convey all that there is to read. Sometimes the narrator can be really stiff and boring. I definitely ran into that trouble while reading the Dune saga. Now, problems with Children of Dune aside, I really got tired with the narrator by then. I just thought, you know, I keep hearing about Stilgar and Sage Tabur, and I just don't care anymore. Now, you know, I have my criticisms with Frank Herbert's writing, and especially Children of Dune, but the audiobook did not do it any favors. While as in the Monogatari series, the actors weren't just narrating, they weren't just reading Nisio Isin's prose, they were acting. They were giving full performances as they would in any other show or game. And of course there's the issue of what kinds of stories am I even interested in experiencing right now? Most of the time, it's games. Games just have what I'm looking for. Their storytelling is done in such a way that I'm so used to, so accustomed to, that I just would rather it be that way. Reading a book, watching a film, or watching a TV series are all very different forms. Not that I dislike these forms in any way. It's just different. And most of the time, I'd rather be making progress on the newest release or something that's been sitting in my backlog for far too long. But hey, books are cool. There's a lot of cool stories hidden behind books. There's a lot of cool stories that have been made into horrible, nasty-ass adaptations, gatekeeping the amazing wealth of knowledge, information, and amazing plots that are hidden in the pages. Now, we've been seeing, or at least I've been seeing, a big resurgence in fantasy novels. Under the surface, authors like Brandon Sanderson have been hot on the tongues of many a booktuber. And though I haven't read anything by that guy, or pretty much anything that most of these people are talking about, I'm fascinated by their little world of intricate fantasy stories that rival my little world of intricate fantasy stories that exist in JRPGs. So I have to say I'm very interested in seeing the other side of culture, although it might be more similar than I may think, as Brandon Sanderson, this is unrelated, but Brandon Sanderson recently talked about liking the Ys games, which, I mean, if he knows about Ys, he has to know about Trails, right? And like, he basically makes Trails. The things that he writes are basically already just Trails. So that's pretty interesting. Well, frankly, I don't think I actually have a point or a conclusion to this. Basically, books are cool, but hard to read. Audiobooks are cool, but sometimes hard to listen to, and sometimes completely non-existent. I have a shit ton of audiobooks on my phone that God knows when I will actually read. Although I did start reading Bakemonogatari Volume 3 because I'm really looking to get back into the Monogatari series. I briefly mentioned it earlier, but I started reading it back in 2019, and essentially, I stopped at... I don't even know how the books are numbered, actually. Basically, I stopped after reading Bakemonogatari Volume 2. And with the reading of Volume 3, I will have read every single audiobook edition of the series. Now, there is a later book that was adapted into an audiobook, and I did already listen to that, even though I hadn't gotten up to it in chronological order. You know, it doesn't really matter. So, the audiobook series, my favorite audiobook series for Bakemonogatari, may be dead and buried, but hey, there are other audiobooks, and they might be good, they might be kinda whatever. I guess I'll see, or I won't. I'll just keep playing video games and enjoying my life as it is. Haha, got him. Anyways, I think that's it. I'm scattered. I think I said all I needed to say. Anyways, books are cool, but like, are they though?